Hola amigos, es hora de que un tiroteo pluma estilográfica. Or, of course, something like that. Today we're going to have a shootout between two pens. I was requested to do a shootout between the two, and I think if you see them, you can sort of guess why the person who posed this question was interested in that. We have the Parker Frontier and the Parker Latitude, two matte steel pens. Now you can get these in a couple of finishes, so they're not all matte steel, but mine are, and I think they are, well, pretty interesting pens. So what I'll do first is show you the two, point out some blatant differences, and then I'll show you how to disassemble them and do a writing sample. And I hope that's going to be useful. So first, the Frontier. The Frontier has been with me for a long time. I have separate reviews of these two pens on my channel. And I explained something about the Frontier there. I wrote some exams with this, so the pen really goes back quite a long way, because when I say exams, I actually mean like final exams for high school. So I was about 18 at the time that I had this pen. It's a decent pen. At the time I paid 32 euros and 50 cents, I think, so it's not extremely cheap, but it's not a very expensive pen either. It says Parker Frontier on the cap. It is all brushed stainless steel. The section was rubber coated. The rubber flaked off at some point, so now it's just a sort of not extremely smooth plastic. It's actually still pretty nice to touch. It just scraped off the flaky bits. So it's even now. This is a medium nib. I thought it was fine, but in fact it's medium. Has a converter. You have to buy that separately. This one is standard Parker push type converters. I'll show you more about that when I take the pens apart. It has a steel nib, and I think it's a pretty decent pen. I think it looks pretty cool. You know, very simple, all steel, no real highlights, but you can get them with highlights and all that stuff. Now you have the Parker Latitude. This was a gift from my late grandfather to my mother, and she could not write with it. Sometimes that happens. It doesn't happen a lot, I think, but sometimes you just get a pen and it doesn't work. It just doesn't fit in your hand, or it just, you know, it won't write when you try it. So she gave it to me. This is also brushed stainless steel. As you can see, this has some gold highlights. I think that's a fairly classical design. The Cross ATX can be bought like this, so you have a stainless steel and gold highlights stuff going on. So a gold clip. It's not real gold at this price, although this pen was a bit more expensive than the Frontier. So a bit of gold there, gold clip, gold ring. It says Parker and France, and that's, you know, pretty much it. Has a bit of gold at the bottom end of the barrel. This one, this is not a solid gold nib, so it's not made entirely of gold. I think it's gold plated. And considering the price, that's definitely an option. Now, this is a fine nib. I think this pen has a pretty nice feed. I'm not sure how well you can see that. I know this won't really focus, but it's very smooth. So it doesn't have any fins in it or anything. It's just, you know, a very regular, smooth, nice feed. So as to size, the Latitude is just a little bit bigger. Latitude, when you uncap them, I think the difference isn't so pronounced. Then, in fact, I think if anything, the Frontier is just a little bit different, a little bit bigger. But then it's really like a millimeter or something. So it's you know, not a big difference. As to smoothness, I personally think the Latitude is smoother. But if it's, I don't know, the gold plating shouldn't really affect that. But I think it's just a little bit of a nicer nib. But the Frontier will definitely get the job done. Weight-wise, I might say that the Latitude is just a little bit heavier, but it's not a big difference. So, two interesting pens. I'll show you how to take them apart, and then I'll do a writing sample. And that's all, let's do it. So I hope this was useful, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye. Okay, so here we have the Parker Frontier, and this is the Parker Latitude. I always like to show you how to disassemble a pen in a shootout, so you can take off the cap, and the barrel. You may have seen here a little bit that the rubber that covered the section is worn. I scraped it off because it was flaking off at some parts. We We have the converter. The interesting thing about these Parker push type converters is that you can actually take those apart. It takes a bit of, you know, you can just pull this bit off. Then you have the actual piston. You can add some silicone grease to that part if you like. It's not really necessary now. And here you have the ball agitator, which makes sure that no ink gets stuck to the back end of the converter, because then it won't actually reach, you know, the front end won't be drawn out, capillary action, etc. And it snaps back in place. Now, one thing I found with these converters is that if you draw up ink all the way, and you see what happens to the actual piston. I'll try to put it a little closer. Hope you can see it. The piston disappears. It disappears behind this black plastic thing, and I find that it can leak that way. It doesn't always do so, and I guess you could put some extra silicone grease somewhere in there or something, but for me, for safety, I always pull back the converter no further, or the piston no further than this bit. So you see a little of a ring, a bit of a ring there. Just don't, make sure you can still see it. I think that's a safe idea. I mean, let's face it, this will not draw up a whole lot less ink than this, so it's not a big thing. Okay, then we have the nib and the feed. These are friction fit. I don't expect them to come out as easy when you try that for the first time. Just be careful, and you can put it in. Now you can pull it out. I mean, the nib and the feed are sort of this clicks in place. It's not a very tight connection, but it does, you know, seem to get the job done. So you can do that. Now we have the Latitude. It's pretty much the same mechanism. So you get the same push type converter. With this pen, you really have to make sure you push it all the way in, which is quite far. You see, if you don't do it all the way, now I start to feel, you know, some feedback. So I stop. With the barrel, won't really fit that way. So then, when you screw it in, you get this sort of annoying squeaky sound, which is the converter being pushed in down further. Okay, so same converter. I won't take that apart again. It's the exact same thing you saw there, so that should be fine. Nib and the feed. These are friction fit. These are more difficult to take out. So you can just take the cloth. Don't use pliers, please. Just a cloth, and you sort of twist the section. It's completely rounded. There's no up or down side for the feed to fit in a specific way. And what I strongly recommend is you to try and hold cradle the nib there and put your thumb on that, and don't twist those, just twist the section. Now, you do this at your own risk, right? Just to be sure. But that way it's easier, and if you twist this bit, of course you don't want to warp the nib or anything, right? It doesn't look like it's extremely thick metal, so be a little careful. Now again, you have that system where the nib is sort of kept in place with these little holes. I'm not sure how well you can see them, but they're little holes in the sort of objects, ridge-like objects you use to this, but which make the nib click in place. Now the feed, so this is Frontier, sorry, this is Latitude, this is Frontier. They look similar but not entirely the same, so I'm not sure whether the nibs are interchangeable. Well, that does actually seem to fit, so you may be able to fool around a bit with that if that's to your liking. I'm not sure what you would gain by that, but maybe have a somewhat smoother nib in the front here. Okay, so this is a fine. Put it back together. Get some grease off. Put that in there. Ink it up in a second. And we put this back together. Back together. What's going on there? Suddenly we get some sort of New Zealand accent going on. Then we have this, and then I need some ink. How about some interesting Ackerman ink, which I just happen to have standing around on my desk. Mauritshuis Magenta. I use this, you know, the fancy bottle, right, with the marble and the stuff. It's fantastic. You trap the ink in the neck of the bottle, and you ink up the pen, which is really easy that way. Oop, there we go. Sorry, got a bit of an issue there. So, what just happened, that would be instructional to explain why I was just screwing around. I filled up the pen, I drew up ink into the converter, and big drops of ink just fell from the feed. When that happens, do not panic. It's very likely that you just didn't push the nib and the feed back in far enough. That can happen. It's nothing to worry about. You just fiddle around a bit. Sometimes there's a specific way the nib and the feed go in. I thought that was not the case with this pen, but maybe I overlooked it. And then there's, for example, a flat end where the bottom of the feed has to slide on top of. You'll just check out your pen, and you'll probably see what I mean. No big issues. Alright. See, it's happening here too. You see that? It's just dripping ink. So that's no problem. Just grab a cloth, wipe it off. Did you hear that click? I just felt a click more than I heard it, but I'm willing to bet that if I do this again, the ink will not drop out. Flow out. What do you call that? See? There we go. No more leaking. So don't worry, don't panic if something like that happens. Try to think logically, and you should be fine. Okay. We's gonna do some writing, boy. Here we got a bit of paper, pens, time for a writing sample. Okay, on the left we have the Parker Frontier. I thought this was an F nib, but it is in fact medium. The ink I've just shown you, Ackerman. Well, I'm not going to write out the full name. Mauritshuis Magenta, if you add a comment if you can't find it anywhere. Here we have the Parker Latitude. Which is a fine. And the ink is the same. Okay. A bit of writing. Notice how I leave that open. No capping. I like living on the edge. The quick brown fox was shot by an arrow. These are Parkers after all. In medium and in fine. The quick brown fox was shot by an arrow with many R's. Very nice pen to use. Both pens are actually smooth. And I remember in my review of this pen, quite a while ago, Parker Frontier, I said it was a little dry. Doesn't seem dry now, but I worked a little bit on the nib. We grow into things. When I got my first fountain pens, I didn't know you could work on your nibs yourself. And sometimes, you know, this works. This is wet, wet, wet. I mean, of the two, this is definitely the wetter one. You see the ink is more saturated, even though this is a fine nib. And this is a medium. It's not that this is dry, but it's drier. You see that? This was still, this was still wet, even though this was the first thing I wrote. Whereas this is now pretty much dry, and that is still wet. And I wrote that later. So, scientifically proven, my dear. Fast writing. Well, I don't see any skipping. And I don't see any skipping here. So if you were to ask me right now, Which one do you prefer? I'd say this one. But this is a more expensive pen. When it comes to flex, this is a steel nib. I think they're both steel nibs, except one has gold plating. Not a whole lot going on, but as you can see, you can get a bit of line variation. This nib, bit of line variation too. But these are not flex pens. For some reason, I have the feeling this one's a little flexier than that one, but that may be an optical illusion. I really don't know. Well, maybe it is an optical illusion. Doesn't really matter. I mean, they're not, as I said, they're not marketed as flex pens or anything. So there you have it. I think these are two nice pens. As you know, this one has been with me for quite a while. I like it a lot. This one is... Whoops, I nearly speared myself with a pen cap. Yeah, this one is the smoother one. So, now this is mixed up, but actually, so this goes there, and this goes there. This is the Latitude. It's smoother, but it's also quite a bit more expensive. I think at least twice as expensive, if not a bit more. So, yeah, it happens. In any case, I hope this was useful. I hope this was worth it, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.